Bonjour, la classe. Okay, it's that time again. It is now chapter 3 of the Lavellan. So if we remember, I have just met Taurus, and I said, what is it? Because I couldn't figure out quite what it is. It's absolutely ginormous. It has really short black hair all over. It's got these ginormous horns that stick out at either side of his head. And Mum is just about to answer me. So let's see what happens in chapter 3. Now, as you might notice, I have my laptop today because my printer stopped working. So this will be a bit different. Let's see how it goes. He's a bull, Mum said simply, but I shook my head. He's not a bull, I laughed, remembering the bull I had seen at the farm park. That had been big, yes, but it would look like a puppy next to this animal. Well, Mum paused, he's a special bull. His name is Taurus. Taurus, I whispered, and the animal bent its head again so I could stroke its head. He is completely harmless, Mum said. Well, he means to be, but you don't want him to tread on you. If he starts running towards you, move to the side. He can't turn so well. As Mum finished speaking, another black creature dived out of the barn so fast I could hardly catch a glimpse of it until it jumped onto Mum's shoulders and stopped moving. It was purring so loud it sounded like a car engine. It's a cat, I grinned. The cat stared at me judgmentally. Out of the 3 animals I'd now met, this was by far the most normal. It was just a black cat with a cute white splodge on its chest. So there you go, Mum smiled. The additions to our family. I've had Taurus the longest. I saved him when he was just a calf, and Sheba here is a new member of our group. She's only been here for 6 months. Where do you get all these animals? I asked. Can I stroke her? Absolutely, Mum said, and I reached out my hand to stroke Sheba. She leant back, but then brought her head forward to rub against my hand. She was as soft as Taurus. Right, darling, I really need to get going. I'll be back for lunch. You can take Darwin for a walk if you like. If you go in that direction, you'll be fine. Mum patted me on the shoulder as though I was one of her animals and opened a gate to the field next to us. Taurus plodded in sedately, and Mum closed the gate. I laughed. I was pretty sure Taurus could step over the gate if he had a mind to. Sheba jumped down from Mum's shoulders and ran off behind the barn. As Mum waved by while she walked back up the hill to the car, I looked across at Darwin. He was sitting, watching me with those big, dark puppy eyes, his enormous tail wagging in the dust. Do you want a walk? I asked. He barked once. This wasn't that like the howl of the night before. He was a friendly, of course I do bark. Come on then, I smiled. To begin with, the thought of being on my own with a giant dog had been frightening. But I began to realise he was just like every other dog I'd ever come across. He loved his walkies. I went inside to look for a lead, but couldn't find one anywhere. Where's Lead? I asked, and Darwin just trotted to the door for his walk. I thought for a moment and realised that a lead would be useless for a dog like Darwin. I'd be pulled over as soon as I got out the door. And there was no traffic at all. Okay then, I sighed, and Darwin pranced out of the door and in the direction my mum had pointed. You've done this before, haven't you? I saw the walk as an opportunity to get to know the area a little, and to get used to Darwin. To begin with, the dog pelted off at high speed, but when I panicked and called him back, he came straight away. Wow, Mum's trained you well, I smiled, stroking his head as he walked to heel. He rubbed against me, making me feel safe and valued. The thought brought me back to Dad, and I wondered what he was doing while I was enjoying myself. I sniffed and raised my head in a determined, I'm not going to be bothered about this way. It didn't work. Darwin stopped walking and turned towards me, pushing against my legs to stop me from walking too. I looked at him and he gave a very quiet bark. I knelt in front of him and he leaned against me. Kneeling, I was much shorter than he was, and we stayed like that for a good few minutes until I felt like I could keep walking. Stroking behind his ears, I stood up and he did the same, trotting next to me. The moorland was sparse, with very little in either direction, except for scrubby grasses and moss. When I came too close to the lime green moss, Darwin nudged me in the other direction. He clearly knew the place better than I did, so I listened to him. As we walked over a little rise, I saw a river further down the slope. The water was rushing over the stones and made a noise like a water fountain. Darwin was panting, so we went down to the river to take a look. The giant dog ran over to the stream as we got closer, and before he dived in, I was sure I heard another splash. Looking in the direction I thought it had come from, I couldn't see anything, and I realised it was probably just the sound of the water over the stones, as it was getting louder the closer we came. While Darwin played around the stream, I started wondering what the time was, and whether Mum would be back soon. I'd forgotten my watch, and I didn't really want her to worry, so we turned around and retraced our steps. I kept the stream in my mind. I don't think I've ever been somewhere so calming. We walked and walked, and while the place looked slightly familiar, I began to worry that we'd got lost. Darwin plodded beside me, slow and sure. I let out a sigh of relief when I saw the roof of the barn and then the cottage. I looked up to see Mum's car up the hill, and I walked faster, but Darwin didn't speed up to stay with me. I'll just let the clock go. Okay. It was then I realised that it wasn't the same car that we'd arrived in yesterday. It wasn't Mum. It was someone else, and I could see two men coming down the hill towards the cottage. "Come on, Darwin," I called, as we ran back to the barn. From there, I could see the two men through a narrow window in the stone building. "They're probably just salespeople or something," I whispered to Darwin, who was standing, pinning me against the barn wall. His lips began to curl up to reveal a row of the largest and sharpest teeth I had ever seen on a dog. I froze before I realised that he wasn't snarling at me. He didn't like the two men. "Shh," I said as the low growl started. He licked his lips and looked up at me, but the sound stopped. I looked through the window again to see the two men knocking on the cottage door. Of course, there was no answer, and I thought they would just leave. Yeah, right. That never happens, does it? The two of them walked around the side of the house, closer to the barn. "Look at that," one of them said, pointing to where Taurus was grazing happily. "That's quite a beastie. I've got the silver bullets here." I gaped as one of the men brought out a small gun, but the other grabbed it off him. "Are you mad?" he hissed. "We're not here for that, and how do you suggest we get that in the car?" His friend snatched the gun back, but put it away sulkily. "Find the dog, and we'll get out of here. This place gives me the creeps," he snapped. I looked down at Darwin, my heart thumping. Darwin looked back at me with his giant puppy eyes, and I wished we had stayed by the stream a little longer. Okay, so that is the end of chapter 3. I'm halfway through writing chapter 4, but please comment on Google Classroom or Class Dojo to tell me what you think happens next. Okay, so until tomorrow, enjoy the story.